speaker is the co-director of Action Space in London. It's a visual arts organisation which provides activities for adults with learning disabilities. Earlier this month, a group from Action Space created an installation inspired by Layla's artwork, which can be viewed in the courtyard outside, so please check that out during the break. So yeah, please welcome Sheryll to the stage.
Hi. Okay, I'm going to speak actually more generally about people with learning disabilities than specifically about women, because I think in the case of people with learning disabilities, the first issue we need to deal with is seeing them as people before we can start talking about some of the other issues around it. So I'll do a very, very quick just introduction to Action Space just to give some context, and then I'll get to where we're going. Next slide. Action Space was launched in the 1960s to provide creative activities for people with learning disabilities. Up until that point, people were really institutionalized and very much sort of confined to day centers. So the whole idea was to get them out of the day center and give them some creative, enjoyable, and challenging activities. In 2004, we took the decision to concentrate on the visual arts. It was an area of strength for us. There were other organizations that were working in performance, in drama, in dance. We were the only people working in visual arts, and we felt that the visual arts was really important for people with learning disabilities because a lot of them were either nonverbal or they had a lot of problems using language. And in a community where words and language are pretty much our currency, they were trapped. They had no way of communicating. So here we are now, 30 years later. We have two studios. They're both in mainstream studio complexes, professional studio complexes. One's in South London, the other one is around the corner at Cockpit Arts. That is really important for us because we see our artists as artists. In most cases, we don't know what their specific learning disability is. We're just engaging with them as artists. So we want to make sure that they're in a professional artist environment, that they're part of the contemporary art sector, that they benefit from creative energy and creative exchange, and that they have opportunities to engage with audiences and all of the other things that professional artists do. We run about 5 weekly studio projects, and we also provide them with opportunities to exhibit and sell their work, which is really important for a developing artist. So, I'll finally get to where I was supposed to be to begin with. As Ella mentioned, we were invited to bring one of our groups here to see Layla's exhibition and to create a body of work around Layla's exhibition, which is the work that you see in the courtyard. We chose to bring our Tuesday group. It's a group of 6 artists. They're very new to us. They joined us mostly in about last October, so they're still very much finding their feet. And Rebecca is their tutor. And I've asked Rebecca just to very quickly, because it was the first time we'd taken them out on a gallery visit, and we weren't quite sure what the response would be. And I asked Rebecca just to say a couple of words about, how they approached it and what they felt and what their response to the work was.
Hi. Well, we came to the gallery. Only 4 participants took part in it, and they all looked at work, and we went through a list of words of what they thought and felt, and we worked from this list of words, and they all picked out different elements that they were interested in. Declan, we were given a torso to work on. Declan was quite troubled that this torso didn't have a head or arms, so he kind of wanted to rebuild it, and he made a dress for it. Alex was very interested in the war aspect, the political aspect, and he wanted to put a peace sign on the body, and he cut out lots of bits from newspapers to do with war headlines. One of the participants is Graham, is very interested in words, so I think he worked from a list of words we made and wrote lots of words. And Zelda was really interested in the pattern element of it and repetition of the pattern and language. So they all worked on these different aspects and brought it together, and you'll see outside. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, so that is sort of the starting point of the reflection on the exhibition. But what I wanted to go on and talk about, just very briefly, is really just this thing about how we see people with learning disabilities, how we see them as passive and needy, and how actually we're the problem and not them, how we limit them in the way that we see them. Quick background, I've got some facts from MenCap, which is the national organisation that supports people with learning disabilities. At the moment, it's estimated that there's about 1.5 million people in the UK with a learning disability. About 40% are women, 60% are men, primarily because there's a couple of things like autism, which tends to happen more in men, but it's high. That's very much an estimated figure because in a lot of communities, learning disability is seen as something that's hidden. It's terribly embarrassing to have someone. So there are people that are not known to social services that are sort of within the community. GPs are becoming much more aware every day of more people with learning disabilities, mostly because they're more aware of it, they're looking out for it more, there's more sophisticated assessment techniques, but also advances in medicine mean that there are things like more premature babies living, more people who would have died earlier. Saying that, 75% of GPs actually have absolutely no training on how to treat and deal with and diagnose people with learning disabilities. The medical model sees learning disability as a tragedy that happens from the impairment of the person. The social model is, again, what I've said before, is about how we put constraints on them so that the disability is actually caused by us as opposed to the impairment. In general, people with learning disabilities don't have the same control over their lives and face challenges with their everyday lives. We've just heard in the news this week that children with learning disabilities are more likely to be excluded from school. They're also socially excluded. They don't have access to after-school clubs and to football, to all of the other things that young people have. 8 out of 10 experience bullying at some point in their lives. As adults, only 1 in 5 works compared to 1 in 2 of the normal population, and at least half of adults with learning disabilities live in the family home, which means that they have no opportunities for gaining independence, for gaining key skills that the rest of us have, or to make choices about their own lives, because it means that they're still having their parents taking decisions for them. They're 58 more times likely to die under the age of 50. Sorry. 4 times more of them than in the general population die of preventable illness, mostly because GPs aren't aware of them, don't know how to treat them. And at least 75% develop mental health problems as a result of coping with their learning disability. The big problem is that they're seen as different. People define them first and foremost in terms of their learning disability instead of seeing them as people with abilities and not abilities and everything else. Their skills and talent are usually completely overlooked, and people are really intolerant of their needs. They find it difficult, because they take a long time to communicate, or there might be other challenges around it. At Action Space, our key objectives are twofold, one of which is to encourage the development of people with learning disabilities, but also to encourage people to think about them differently by showing their artwork. And what I've done, which I'm going to do really quickly, is I've got 3 of our ladies that work with us who all have really thriving creative practices. And I'll start with Naina. Naina's in her mid-40s. She's been with Action Space for 12 years, and she works with one of our South London groups. Naina has developed this talent, or this sort of process where she wraps things. So she starts with found objects, which could be foam, it could be paper, it could be anything, and she wraps and wraps and wraps, and she uses masses of tape, which is a nightmare on our budgets. But these things grow and grow and grow, and as you can see, they get to be quite large, and then part of the whole process is how she places them. The 2 pieces here were part of the recent Studio Voltaire members show. Now, Studio Voltaire is an artist cooperative in South London They've been going for a number of years. They've got about 400 members who have been involved with them, and that 400 members includes a lot of people who are quite prominent in the contemporary art world today. Every second year they have a members show where it's an open submission that anyone who is a member can submit work. We submitted Naina's work. It didn't say she has a learning disability or she's from Action Space and please be kind to her. It was just seen alongside everyone else's work, and I think they had about 500 submissions, and these two pieces were selected and shown in their recent members show. The next person I wanted to mention was Mary. Mary again works in our South London group. She's within Action Space for 3 years. She's 48. She originally came to us making wall work, a lot of painting and drawing, because she had done workshops in her day centre before, and that's what they told her to do. We give people a lot of freedom in the way they work. Her work started coming away from the wall, and she started constructing these sort of quite ornate collages and assemblages, which then developed into these sort of threaded pieces. Now, this was an event that we did at Southside Shopping Centre in Wandsworth last May, where basically we gave her a lot of space and she filled it with these sculptures. And this actually entire installation was purchased by the Museum of Everything and then was featured at their exhibition in Selfridges last year, which was quite amazing. And what's interesting about all of our artists, and we give them a lot of freedom, is that their work continues to develop. So Mary has now started to sort of compress and become really fine-tuned in her work, and her work is becoming a lot more sculptural and structured, as you see there. And then the last person is Kathy. Kathy works with one of our North London groups. Kathy joined us in September 2009. It was a brand new group that we started for people with severe learning disabilities who apparently hadn't done art before. Kathy came to us. We were warned when she came in that she has an obsession about wrapping things and she can hurt herself and cut herself, so please keep her away from yarns and anything that she could wrap around her. So of course, being us, we put her down in front of a lot of yarn and everything else the first day. And within about a month, she created this, which was, I think she called it the Indian Dancer, which was actually purchased by a textile collector at one of the Cockpit Open studios. And her work has continued on. We've given her the space to sort of look at how she uses yarn. Sometimes they're 2D, like this cloud piece. And now she's actually starting to branch out a little bit more and making individual pieces and then looking at how they relate to each other. And this was a piece that we exhibited last December at Cockpit Open Studios, which got quite a lot of attention. So to tie it up together, all three of these ladies have what is qualified as severe learning disabilities. They all have very high support needs, which means that they're out with a support worker all the time. They have limited communication skills. They do have some language, but it's not a conversation as we would see it. And they all have what is referred to as challenging behavior, which of course we've not seen any of when they're in the studio with us. None of them could discuss their work in the context of contemporary art practice or reflect on postmodernism or anything that we do. But all of their work is very vibrant, it's very relevant, it's all work that can and sometimes does sit in galleries alongside other work. It's all been appreciated, people buy their work, but they can't communicate with us because they can't use words. So to end with a question, if you had all of this inside you and you couldn't communicate it out, wouldn't you have challenging behavior? And that's it. And on one last slide, I was watching Sport Relief last night. We're always open for donations. And to make it easy for you, we have Just Thanksgiving. So if you want to go to the next slide, we gratefully receive any donations.
Thank you, Sheryll. You're doing fantastic work. Has anyone got any questions, or are we still saving them for later? Looks like we're saving them. Brilliant.